Right. Hello, my name is Megan, and I'm a second year medical student at the University of Wisconsin School of Medicine and Public Health. And I'm working with Wisconsin Voices for Recovery to bring you Saturday Night Chat. Saturday Night Chat is a monthly chat that creates a space for people to share their recovery journey and to show people in and seeking recovery that they are not alone and recovery is possible. Today, we'll be hearing from Sean.
Uh,
So we'll just get right to it. Sean, can you tell me a little bit about yourself and what initially motivated you to do this interview?
yeah, well, okay, thanks. Well, I myself am also a student at the University of Wisconsin, Green Bay. I'm a couple handfuls of credits shy of a bachelor's degree in philosophy. I'd like to get into the social work program eventually. And what sort of motivates me to come onto this? Well, so I have a lot of ideas that are a little bit more profound than you might find in the average circles, and it to me, it's a good, it's an academic and a scholarly audience who might be able to grasp or comprehend some of, the philosophies that I have. And when I get the opportunity to put some of my ideas into the classroom through my schoolwork, and with a community like this, I feel like it's well received, and it encourages me to really put my mind, into gear to just to think. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, great. Congratulations on almost finishing that bachelor's degree. Um, and we're glad that you're here with us and here to share a little about your story. So, can you just give us a, broad overview? Like, what did your recovery journey look like?
Okay, so I know this now looking back. I didn't exactly know this from the beginning, but I would describe my recovery as more of a process of discovering what is truth. Okay, so it first begins, by me, in clinicals and working in the industry with professionals to look at my own trauma and how my own trauma has dictated some of my own barriers, behaviors, and decisions, and how they related to, my substance use and my mental health. Then that sort of vision or that sight started to evolve into more of looking at where trauma comes from. And I started thinking about historical trauma, generational trauma, and systemic trauma. And I would kind of put that all under like the umbrella of what some people might understand as cognitive trauma. Okay, and then that started taking my thinking to like a whole another level, and another can of worms opened up. So then like my recovery, I guess, transformed. So I like to look at it like this. So recovery, it's I use the word recovery, kind of means to me like being restored to what I like to describe as a more natural condition, which I kind of relate, this natural condition to being of service to others, a world where it's full of people helping people. And again, to me, that would be natural. That's what feels natural. And I understand that's maybe not for everybody on the planet. Some people might, want to be more of service to themselves. But I do think that the things we do, at first might seem a little vague, but eventually we start to understand that, it kind of goes one or two ways, leans in one of two directions, being of service to ourselves or service to others. And at some point, my recovery becomes a tool that, I would use like a lens to view everything that happens around me and to me in a way that helped me foster the qualities or virtues that were conducive towards my spiritual goals. And I guess the epitome of my spiritual goal is it's to be of service to others. Yeah, so then like using my recovery and this lens to view everything that happens to me to orientate myself towards being of service to others and not myself, it helps me deal with my frustrations, with the world around me, with my environment, and like my local community. And that would include not only like remedying the bigger traumas, but also the small ones and like my day-to-day activities. Like when I'm at work and I'm supposed to have left an hour ago, and every time I try to walk away, the phone rings and like I can't leave it unanswered, or the little things that drive us kind of crazy. Well, my recovery helps produce in me the personality traits or the personal abilities, to continue to, and just be of service and not become bitter or like irritated or resentful. And so my recovery quickly went from, trying to keep the peace of mind needed to recover from drugs and alcohol and the effects of like what I consider the mass delusions of society. But not only that, it really helped me process my relationships. So if I'm going to use that kind of the lens of like, being of service to others, I started thinking in terms like, okay, so if a relationship ended, it didn't have to be because it failed for whatever reason it stopped working, like somebody wasn't, I don't know, faithful, or somebody couldn't communicate well, or whatever it was. It would just, be that some relationships are short, like days, maybe months, or just a few years, and some are a lifetime. But I think a relationship needs to end when the learning curve ends. Then it's time to move on to another relationship with another learning curve. And so, like, learning to rewrite everything in a positive way to be conducive towards a spiritual goal, and being restored to a natural condition of being of service to others also allows me to discern in this world like what fosters division. And that's like a whole nother bigger conversation. But I think there are a lot of things in the world that seek to divide us, and that's a huge part of my recovery, because I don't think we were created for division. And again, that's another subject, but that's all I'll say on that for now.
Yeah, so it sounds like, you adopted this whole new mindset through your recovery journey, and I'm really focused on discovery, as you were kind of mentioning. So I guess I just wanted to know, like, what led you to your recovery journey? How did you get from point A to point B when you were ready to kind of embark on this journey?
I love questions like that. Thank you. But I guess in a simple level, it's really just, the pain, especially the pain in like addiction, when everything is just, kind of falling apart, and I don't know how to mentally deal with it. But if I could explain this pain in a little bit creative way, in a bigger way, I'd really like to do that. I'll start by sharing that the pain from being broken in addiction, really turned into something more that has helped me stay sober beyond traditional communal living environments like sober living or residential treatment centers or even psych wards, because I for a long time I wasn't able to stay sober beyond an environment like that. I also believe that this pain is involved in, not just in addiction, but also in like not knowing how to live in a more profound way beyond the mere consumption of goods and being a consumer. I think it's easy for me to understand this because, well, I'm not from a family with generational wealth where I can buy new cars, houses, boats, go on vacations, nice clothes, things like that, which often satisfies, most people. And also, there's some pain attached to not having hope or a belief to experience more than what I have experienced or am experiencing is possible. And it's really hard to attain, a belief and a hope like that. And I think without that belief, I think there's a certain amount of pain that people can't escape. And for me, seeking recovery was the beginning of the freedom that I have now. Now, some people may live lives where they have limitless hope and dreams, and others, like those stuck in the subculture of addiction, or those of us who are stigmatized by mental illness, do experience that pain for whatever reason. And this sort of, this is sort of like that pain is what I call, the foot of the cross, where I was led to recovery, when I was open to a new way of life, and when I was willing to listen to someone else besides myself. And uh, so back to this journey kind of discovering what is truth. I stayed in recovery because I think societal ideology around capitalism and consumerism is very harmful, and it fosters division and more of the pain that I wanted to be free from. So to me, it looks like people are under a mass delusion where there's sort of negative intended construct of a limited created reality or a contended experience of ordinary reality that is just too painful to go on in. Like, I really don't care about pursuing wealth. I really don't care about working for money, to get a house, to be it just seems like so repetitive and humdrum of an experience. So I can understand why myself and why other people would drink or drug. Some say to numb themselves or to escape the feelings that, that we have. And I think there are feelings that we have in early recovery or addiction that are they're bigger than ourselves. And we don't have the intelligence to speak on them, clearly. And sometimes for me, my only way out of this matrix was, to come unglued through a relapse or mental health crisis, so I can try to find a way out of, that way of life, and rebuild myself in recovery. Because in recovery, you kind of just get to restart everything. And, that's not always by choice. It's usually, you could be coming out of jail, you could lose your apartment, you could get evicted, or, you just burn bridges and lose things. So yeah, I'll just leave it at that, I guess.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that and kind of your experience with the pain and being able to, find your way back from that. So that's very helpful. Thank you. Um, and it takes a community, it takes a lot of people to help, someone get through recovery. So I was just wondering, what did your support system look like? What sort of resources did you have that helped you along that journey?
I'd probably, I don't know if they'd appreciate it, but I'm just going to mention three people by first name, the three most influential people in my journey. Okay, so that's going to be Chrisma, Michael, and Gary. Okay, all three of these people I would consider to be industry leaders, and from them I received common influence spiritually, and, influenced me. And even though we don't speak or really talk to each other for various reasons, I still consider them industry leaders, and these are people who I value because, and I hope I don't make any offense at these statements, but I value them because they don't have strong backgrounds in the clinical diagnosis and treatment of symptoms from addiction and mental illness. They're not a professional, a family, or a friend, and because of that, they can reach me in a different way. But all three of these individuals were, or are, or will be at some point, I imagine, on some level, like an employer of mine, or somebody who supports me in some way, shape, or form. And they seem to use their organizations to offer sanctuaries of understanding or activities in the community that reduce stigma and lessen judgment for what people think it means to be an addict or a person with a diagnosis. And they have environments that radiate empathy within their organization and their businesses. I see that as a really profound impact, that they do these things. And I try to stay close to those kinds of men and women of virtue and try to imitate them. But the reason why they are important to me is because they introduced me to virtues that others can't. Like professionals might be bound by a code of ethics. Families are sometimes just too close to know how to say what they're trying to say, and friends are more on a parallel footing, so they're not necessarily showing me new things. We might be learning new things together, but not exactly showing each other. And these virtues that these people are practicing, well, they illuminate the path forward towards healing, and inspire me to break the ceiling of my own personal limitations and self-discovery. So again, it's like the idea of limitless hope. I felt is needed for people like me with dual diagnosis and um, stuff like that.
Yeah, that's great that you had those people and that kind of guidance through your recovery journey. I'm just wondering, did you use any go through any like community programs or community resources in that journey, or
Yeah,
just kind
yeah.
of navigated
So
that?
okay, so yeah, Charisma would be like the director and founder of like a recovery community with a facility with daytime hours and connections to medical providers and treatment centers. And she would kind of be the person that knows a non-judgmental language and has the environment with empathy. Michael would be the director of the homeless shelter. So just a little bit disclosure, right? Like I've been homeless for I think a little over 4 years. Not because I'm poor, don't have money, and so like I've utilized the housing resources in town and learned what the fight against homelessness really looked like. For a single male who's not married, that the system is sort of stacked on top of and against that person. So learning how to self-resolve issues was paramount to learn, through him. And Gary would be kind of like a spiritual mentor of mine, and had brought me into a church, and had really shown me what being employed for holy purposes might be useful for. And a
Yeah.
lot of service work and vocation stuff at all three of these these different organizations. So
Yeah, thank you for expanding on that. I think it's really cool to see how like the different sectors and the different factors that are affecting, your life and your recovery kind of intertwined into that journey. So that's really cool to see.
thank you.
So now we talked about kind of the support that you had and the people that helped you through this. I was wondering, what barriers do you see to people getting recovery help, especially, coming from somebody studying medicine, what barriers do you see that impacts people from getting medical help or any other sort of help on towards this recovery?
Oh, barriers. That's interesting. Okay. Well, I think the really the biggest barrier is what I would kind of coin weaponized public health language. Okay, and if I can explain, so I sort of think that public health language has been weaponized so that people feel stigmatized when seeking medical care and helping communities. Because, if we really think about language, okay, language just it doesn't just affect the community and the individual. It has the ability to manipulate the mind, and oftentimes our language kind of determines our reality, and our language can determine our universe and the very specific rules that govern our experiences. And so, with the idea of like, okay, I'll just use somebody who might have like really bad anxiety instead of saying that it's an illness and we need to treat you, what about treating it like an ability or a gift or like a superpower, right? Or, identify it at least with a language that creates or manifests it as an area of strength or weakness and have feedback from professionals like a deeper understanding of a systematic form of introspection or practice that allows the person to build upon that mental faculty. Because anxiety doesn't have to be in the form of paranoia. It could be described as something like a heightened ability to be hyper aware, focused, and concentrated. Like I get anxiety when I go outside, and not because like I'm nervous, but I have a very, very efficient way of like noticing things that other people might not be able to because their critical thinking processes have been bypassed. And I think it's fair to say that our critical thinking processes are sort of trained out of us through the indoctrination of, it's, we could even say the educational system that there's probably more to that than I want to say right now, but people with other diagnoses like schizophrenia, right? When they say they're hearing something that other people say they don't, that doesn't necessarily, that doesn't mean that there isn't something audible that, you know, they just might have the intellect to perceive or the wisdom to register on a subtle scale the impressions that the body is giving them as it is the instrument to pick up on certain things, right? Like we'll just say dogs hear frequencies that people don't. Like maybe people can, our ears are shaped differently. Maybe through like meditation practices, we might be able to be aware of, you know, you know what I mean. So that's a whole nother bag of worms there. But and when someone with a diagnosis is talking about seeing something, they may not be talking about seeing an hallucination. They just might be talking about how symbolism appears to them in their life. And not often. It's not often that we have a psychiatric interpreter around to kind of reframe things for us. And people who say they can't see what the diagnosis person talks about seeing, well, first of all, like if you're meeting with a psychiatrist, that psychiatrist wasn't ever in the habits and routines with the diagnosed person to, to confirm or deny that the circumstances orchestrated around them, like produce or don't produce something that is or isn't an hallucination or a delusion, and so like that's just seems really frustrating too. And again, the language that controls all our reality I think has created through an intention an ordinary reality that people share, right? Because people don't really support the truth, especially, reality altering truths that could change things. So every time I have to meet with a professional that said I was experiencing a delusion or hallucinating, like it turned me off, turned me away. it was certainly true that they weren't spending time with me in my habits and routines to confirm or deny what I'm saying is authentic or genuine. So it creates an atmosphere that I don't want to go to for help, you know. And for people who might have profound insights gleaned outside the classroom that they want to share with other people in their network, public health language, I feel, has been weaponized to set them up to fail at every turn. Like when you give somebody a diagnosis or call them delusional or tell them that they're hallucinating, right off the bat, it causes unmistakable social damage. And it even limits their career potential, their earning potential, and one's ability to support and provide for their family. It really robs it really robs someone of their vitality and what they need to develop a passion for learning, especially in areas which might be to the individual their favorite or most valued part of themselves. You know, and so I don't think that someone with a strong clinical background, you know, has the language that, you know, brings me to what I need to feel empowered. I think the language needs to grow to become more open to include spirituality and environments that don't eliminate new ideas. Because the current language seems a little uncomfortable to me, you know, and I've almost chosen rather to stand alone in my truth, going through like isolation to find my own transformation, which has likely led me to having a lot of good excuses for relapsing as many times as I have. And it's probably kept me from gathering with others to learn how to protect ourselves from the, you know, the forces that seek to, you know, divide us. And it's just been really difficult.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that perspective. So, I guess I kind of wanted to expand on that a little bit. So, you were talking about stigma and stigmatizing language and how harmful that can be. Do you have any suggestions or like things that you would rather hear from people, you know, either the medical community or just some of these other recovery processes, whether it be some of the more spiritual side or like rehab centers or things like that? Like, what types of language would you like to hear?
Well, you know, that's interesting. I mean, you know, I get into a lot of okay, most people in my eyes can't see past the tips of their noses. Very few can see a few feet in front of them, but some people can see much further into things, you know. So like just for example, you know, okay, when I meet with an AODA counselor, they're always talking about surrender. You just need to surrender. Well, there's a duality to surrender because if I were to accept the limitations that people would put on me, well, then I don't step into that limitless hope and potential that I need to crawl out of the deep dark pit that I found myself in, you know, and especially when you talk about, you know, making contact with something, you know, like the Holy Spirit or having a relationship with the universe and, you know, synchronicities kind of, you know, speaking to you through symbolism and guiding you towards, you know, a noble end that you might have been created for. How do you really bring that into, you know, into the recovery realm, into the professional industry? You know, because the DSM-5 is really sort of the Bible for clinical people, and that doesn't include any of that. It includes almost a condemnation for symptoms and like a death sentence to people's sources of aspirational or you know even like limitations. uh you know, and I get that's a bit of a tricky one, but when you have a relationship with something like the universe or God or a higher power, in talking about surrendering, you know, you know, that relationship really breaks many limitations and you shatter many ceilings. If we consider all some of the amazing testimonials we've heard from people who have overcome, you know, addiction and mental illness and gone on to create businesses and even found communities, they didn't, you know, they didn't do so with the language that they got in a lot of the places where people go for like you know, for treatment now. And I do get there's a sort of liberation that comes with surrendering and letting go of controlling people, places, and things, and you know, and getting some peace of mind and not having to fight against things and stuff like that. I just, you know, it's really interesting how many times I've heard I need to accept this or that and surrender. When truth be told, you know, everybody has different battles and you know, some people can see targets that others can't, and they have to fight for that at the sort of detriment of their entire life when people don't know the prophetic actions they're taking and some of the reasons they have to, you know, stand their own ground, stand in their truth, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Uh,
I think that really speaks to like the individuality of a recovery journey and making sure people feel empowered in what they're going through. And yeah, I think that's a really perspective. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Um, so, kind of on the same lens, what are some of the unmet needs that you see in the community for people who are seeking recovery?
Great. Well, perfect time to ask me that. So the two needs that I want to speak on, that, the first would be the needs of, in my community concerns the role of peer support, because, peer support, what I've heard from my peers has allowed me to recover in the way that I have, which is, invaluable to me. So, like, first thing I want to speak on is, out of every area of industry, the wage increase for peers has been the least. And no matter how much training and certifications and time spent educating, like, ourselves that peers do, we're always expected to come in at the bottom scale, and start at, just the low wages. Though this is some of the most fundamental and profound work that is happening in our community, not just for the benefit of the person, but for everyone around them, and, every sort of influence they have in others, right? So, like, to spend time with another person is beyond value, especially when they learn how to foster their own resiliency for their own journey of personal evolution, and learn how to, like, overcome their limitations and surmount obstacles and whatnot. So, like, I'm on something like my fifth or sixth year as a peer support specialist, and every time I apply to a place, I get denied because of, like, okay, my life experience. And sometimes it's, my criminal background. And sometimes it's, okay, like, I don't have enough. What I hear all the time is, I'm not good enough, when somebody tells me you don't have a year or two clean, or, somebody tells me I can't participate in the things that I believe would help me get well and stay well because I'm not well enough yet, if that makes sense. And it just, and I also get denied, like, housing because of my life experience. And, like, we could say it's because of my criminal record, or it's because, I don't have the right amount of clean time. And I just, I just, I kind of went off on a tangent there, but, I really think that clinicals, and professionals should be working more in tandem in a more coordinated way with peer support specialists and with peer supports, because I certainly wouldn't have recovered without hearing the things that my peers have said to me. And, not to say that professionals and clinical people aren't useful, they certainly are. And I think we should keep a peer a peer. We can't really blur those lines too much. And, uh, yeah, I think that, there should be more peer support, in communities. Now, the other thing I want to speak about is, like, okay, it's housing, obviously, and the population that I would relate with the most, and who I believe needs the most advocacy, is the homeless population. So I've been homeless, like I said, for almost, over 4 years, right? And it's not because I'm poor, and it's not because I'm drunk, and it's not because I'm dirty. I don't have any felonies, and I don't have any violent charges. I have some disorderly conducts a few years back, but I got like five of them. And every time I get denied because, oh, I look like I'm a risk to my community or the property. And a lot of my disorderly conducts are just for fighting by standing for virtues and principles, and if we really think about it, like, our country was born out of treason, and all progression and progress that's been made were through tension with the law, because the laws were wrong, or societal standards were holding, society back because they were wrong too. And, so, like, I think that not everybody's homeless because they're lazy, and not everybody's homeless because, they're addicted, and not, for example, I get bombarded with credit card stuff all the time. You're pre-approved, but every time I apply, I get denied. I've never used credit because I've never been able to have credit. I don't have bad credit, and I've never defaulted on anything. I don't owe any money anywhere, but I can't get credit. It seems like such falsehood, and I get told all the time that I've applied at financial institutions for a mortgage, right? And I get told I don't, they use the word qualify. Like, when you tell somebody they don't qualify, like, what does that mean to them? That what do you think that person's hearing? I'm not good enough, right? And, so, I've been forced to, like, meet my housing needs other ways, and somehow, like, have my children with me too, living in a hotel, this, that, blah, blah, blah. But I don't have a lot of, like, security and stability that other people have, because, I don't know, and not just because of my background, but, like, my credit score. So because I'm not spending money I don't have, it's one of the reasons why I don't qualify for a home. It just seems bogus. And I'm Native American, right? So, like, when somebody tells me I don't qualify, what I hear is, oh, like, I don't know, just think about that for a minute. I can't have a home in the on the land I'm from, like, and that's probably not the truth, right? Because we're probably protected and have a natural right for some land, but also, like, if I were to go fishing to, feed myself, I could get in trouble because I would be told I need a license or I need to ask permission, technically, but legally, that's not the truth. The community would tell me, like, why don't you get food stamps or why don't you get a job? Like, why I can't just fish when it's so there's a lot of falsehood, and I feel like what it is people are forced to participate in this intended construct, which is a system that has a flow of data incentives that people blindly follow without even realizing that violates like their natural God-given fundamental human rights. And this is what I mean by public health language has been weaponized. It kind of creates, it manipulates the mind into like people not really knowing what's happening around them. And uh so like I think we really need some housing for people who I can't tell you. I used to work at the homeless shelter, and I live in a hotel where at any given time there are this many homeless individuals and families here that I help transition to a program, and it is so sad when a woman who's lived here or a man who's lived here their entire lives, could be 60 or 70, have to be placed or housed in another city in another county far away because there isn't any options here for them. Or women with children, who don't have anywhere to go, and it's not always because they didn't pay their rent, and it's not always because they were making poor choices. Sometimes the landlord just wants to rent the place to his family. And it's just, I don't know, there isn't enough housing, and I get it, you can't make it easy enough for people to, you know, receive it easily, but like they have really let people die out in the elements because they wouldn't help them here in Manitowoc, and that's really sad. I'm sorry, I'll leave that one alone now.
No, that's a really good point, is, sometimes people can do everything they can to, recover from this, addiction. But then there's other factors, and there's other things that just compound and make it that much harder. So I think that's
Yeah. Like my criminal record, I went to jail, I was on probation for the disorderly conduct. Like I did the time and I paid the price, but it keeps punishing me every time I apply at a place because it comes up again and I'm judged on it again.
right. Right.
Yeah, it's frustrating.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. I think that's a very helpful perspective. I just wanted to finish off with one more question for you. What is one piece of advice that you would like to share with other people that are kind of starting out their recovery journey that you wish you would have known?
Gee, I know we talked about you potentially asking me something like this in the
Right.
beginning, but I kind of forgot. Um, I would just say that your recovery means to you what it does because it's your recovery. And so give yourself a definition of recovery that does not allow anyone else to describe you as not in recovery, no matter what, because that's the difference between life and death. That's the difference between, like, that's just dangerous. So again, define your recovery in a way that your recovery is, uh, what it means to you, and let no one, no matter what happens or what you've done or doing, would be able to describe you as not in recovery. Give yourself a personal definition of recovery. So mine is being restored to a more natural condition and recovering that state of, people helping people and being of service to others, and at first it was like, I can't do that if I'm drunk or if I'm using drugs. And then it just turned into like, okay, here's what I'll say about it. One time I was in a relapse, and a good friend of mine called me and was like, okay, I'm gonna bail my son out of jail, and I want you to come up alongside of him. I'm bail him out on Sunday, and Monday, Tuesday, help him get insurance and help him get into a treatment center. And I was like, oh my God, geez, okay. I felt like it was an angel calling me to test me to see like what's inside of my heart. And I was able to like put my shit aside to help this person, right? But I don't think, somebody who's struggling that helps another person is help at all. I think that's love. So I think I was found to have love inside of me, and because of that, other opportunities and doors opened up. So I would just, can just be sure that your definition of recovery is one that for no reason can anybody eliminate you from being in recovery. because it's yours and it means to you what you want it to mean, and that's it.
Well, great. Thank you so much. And thank you for answering all my questions and sharing your ideas and your perspectives. We really appreciate this as we, work to share stories and work to make sure people don't feel alone on their recovery journeys. So thank you
Thanks,
so much.
thanks for letting me go on those rants.